welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, I am Rachel, and today I'm going to be talking you through my first 5 books of 2022, so what I have read so far this year, and I'm going to talk you through a little bit about how I'm keeping track of that with my reading journal, and what I've enjoyed about the books I've read so far. So this year I have started keeping a reading journal. In the past I've been bullet journaling, which I have taken a little bit of a step back from, as it was causing me quite a lot of stress to keep up with. I loved my reading spreads in there, and I really like keeping a track of how much I'm reading and what I am reading. So I decided to go for a little reading journal this year. So I started off with a double-page spread of my 2021 reading stats. So you can see in 2021 I read 27 books. My goal was 25, so I did surpass that goal. And I like to keep track of the genres I'm reading, male and female authors, and also where those authors come from. So I'm trying to diversify the books that I am reading, because I tended to stick to the same sort of books. So as you can see, last year my preferred genre was thriller, which is generally the books that I am drawn to. I had quite a large proportion of those books by female authors, and the majority of those from the UK as well. So I am trying to diversify a little bit more, although the first 5 books I've read this year are all by female authors. But yeah, I'm just going for some books that I really like the look of this year. I'm doing a little bit more research into the types of books I'd like. I love Lucy Jane Wood's YouTube channel for book recommendations and suggestions. So a couple of the books that I've read so far this year have been based on her recommendations. I read on a Kindle rather than buying paperback books. I know that some people are quite against Kindles and I do really miss that smell of a new paperback book, but I absolutely love reading on my Kindle. I have a Kindle Paperwhite, so I can read in the dark. I read every night before I go to sleep, which during the week when I'm tired from work is normally only a couple of pages. But yeah, I absolutely love my Kindle. It goes everywhere with me as well, just in case there's any moments in the day that I might be able to read. So I also set a goal for this year. So my goal for 2022 is to read 30 books. I would like to read 30 books this year. So then how I'm keeping a track of my reading is each month I am keeping track of how many pages I read each day. Now that sounds like it's quite a strenuous task, but it's really not. I literally just jot it in when I pick up my book of the next day, and jot in how many pages I read the previous day. So yeah, so in January so far I read 631 pages. February was slightly more, I think, on 803, and obviously March isn't over yet, so I don't know how many I will have read in March. But I've finished 5 books so far. The 5th one I finished this morning. So I'm going to talk you a bit through what I've read and what I liked about them. So my first book of 2022 was How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie. This was the first book I'd read by Bella Mackie, and I absolutely loved it. The quote on the front cover is by Jojo Moyes, another of my favourite authors, and she said that it was funny, sharp, dark and twisted, which I think is an absolutely perfect summary of the book. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. As the title suggests, How to Kill Your Family, there's quite a lot of grisly murders that are taking place, and although your main character, Grace, is a bit of an anti-heroine, you know very early on in the story that she is in prison, but you obviously don't know the events that have led up to her being there. It was very entertaining. I called it wickedly funny. I just absolutely loved it. It was just perfect. Like I said, it was a modern fiction with a little bit of a twist, and as plot twists go, I found that this one was quite subtle and really clever. So I really enjoyed that about it. It wasn't until sort of the epilogue is a very suggestive epilogue that sort of leaves things hanging in the air a little bit, and you sort of have to infer the plot twist yourself, which I felt like I worked quite hard for the plot twist. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was really entertaining. I thought it was beautifully written. I was just going to share with you one of the highlights that I made from this book, and I just really liked it. I thought it was a really clever way of describing that feeling when your brain is just so full of overwhelming thoughts that you don't quite know what to do with it. Where's it gone? Let's find it. Yeah, so one of the quotes that I highlighted, I tend to highlight things on my Kindle if I really like them. I don't do it in every book, and I don't do it very often, but this one just spoke to me. I'd have been weighed down to the point of inertia by the business of my brain. And I just absolutely loved that quote. I felt like I knew that feeling of being weighed down to the point of no control with the business of my brain. So yeah, that was one of my favourite points of the book. I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was really enjoyable, although a bit dark and twisted and grisly. It also had me like laughing out loud at the same time. So yeah, it was a bit of everything for me. It had that sort of thriller theme in amongst the modern fiction. So yeah, I really liked it. I gave that book 5 stars, and that was my first read of 2022. My second book of 2022 came from watching a YouTube video by Lucy Jane Wood, some of her book recommendations, and it was Such a Fun Age by Kiley, Reid. This one was an interesting one, another modern fiction, and covered a lot of quite topical themes. So the premise of the book focuses around the topic of racism in the US and white privilege. It was really interesting read. So the premise is that Amira, a young black woman, is the nanny for a wealthy white American couple, and she shares a large chunk of the caregiving of their toddler Briar. One evening, Amira is called from a night out, where she is dressed as a young woman on a night out, to take Briar in a family emergency, and she walks her around a supermarket in the US and experiences a quite horrific and unsettling scenario to read, where she's pretty much accused of kidnapping the young white toddler that she's with. The book has some really interesting relationships between characters. So Alex, you are left sort of incredulous at her superiority complex, or her sort of saviour complex over Amira, and that she feels that it is her right to make Amira's life better. There's an interesting crossover in characters between someone from Alex's past who becomes into her present again, and yeah, the whole interwoven relationships were interesting. But I suppose at the heart of it all for me was that Amira, the relationship between Amira and Briar the toddler, who seems a very complex young 3-year-old, and one of the quotes that I absolutely loved from this book summed up the character of Briar completely, because you're sort of believing that this child is 3 years old, potentially 4 years old, and yet the profound things that came out of her mouth occasionally were quite remarkable. So I really loved this quote about young Briar. Let's find it. So whilst other children were easy audiences who loved receiving stickers and hand stamps, Briar was always at the edge of a tiny existential crisis. And you can really tell that about her character. She's sort of a really complex and profound little girl, which was quite entertaining. So I gave this book 4 stars. I did enjoy the themes running through it. I was disappointed with the ending. I felt it was too loose. I didn't quite get enough closure for my liking that I like from a book. Yeah, but overall it was an interesting read. I would recommend it. Like I say, the themes of white privilege and racism are obviously very prevalent for the world that we live in at the moment, and it was just interesting to see how that played out along the course of the book. So yeah, it was a good read. I would recommend. Okay, book number 3 was When She Finds You by AJ McDine, my first psychological thriller of the year. I gave this one only 3 stars, which is quite a harsh rating from me. I generally give 4 or 5 stars to a book that I've read. This one was a tricky one. So it flitted quite a lot between the past and the present, and a lot of the time I couldn't really see the relevance of the past stories to what was going on in the present. And I still think, having finished the book, that some of the moments from the past were quite unnecessary. One of the redeeming features is a very likeable main character. She works for a charity that helps vulnerable people do gardening, so you know, it's quite a nice job to have. And she has these moments that are increasingly unsettling happening to her. One of the things that I found quite frustrating about the book as well is that quite early on you see that there are two people that could potentially be behind what's going on in her life, and I just found it a little bit too predictable. But the end sort of moment, without giving too much away, I felt like the climax of the book, with the sort of main event that happens, I felt like it was just purely written to shock, and I just find myself not really being that shocked by it. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, because I had really enjoyed the book and the suspense that was built up through it and throughout the course of the book. I would say probably about the final 20% of the book, I was just like, right, okay, that's it then, is it? That's fine, let's just get it over with. I mean, I hate feeling like that about a book. I like to be sort of kept on my toes until the very end. So yeah, I found that a little bit too predictable, and the swapping between past and present was unnecessary for me. I did enjoy the story though. Like I said, it did build suspense well. I did enjoy it as a psychological thriller. I just would have liked a little bit more of a shock factor to it, a little bit more of a plot twist. I felt like it was quite predictable by the ending. So yeah, just 3 stars for that one. Mediocre. Probably wouldn't recommend. On to book number 4. This is probably my favourite book that I've read so far this year, and I imagine it will definitely be in my top 5 books of this year, because it's going to take some beating. And it was The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I felt like I was a little bit late to the party with this one. I know quite a few people who have already read this, and it's been out a couple of years, I think. Psychological thriller, and just brilliant. I absolutely loved it. This was an absolute, for sure, 5-star book. It's told from 3 alternate perspectives of different characters, and this is another book that flips between past and present, however, did so magnificently. Like, every single chapter I was adding a little bit more to my image of what was going on. So the premise is that a family live in a mansion in Chelsea, and in the present day, Libby, who has just turned 25, inherits this mansion from Chelsea. Unbeknownst to her, it belonged to her biological parents. She's been adopted, brought up to have a pretty average life, and yeah, she inherits this Chelsea mansion at the age of 25. And it's sort of abandoned. It's an abandoned mansion, and it's quite obvious that something has gone on here. And from the other perspective, you're learning what happened there in the past. So you come from the perspective of a boy called Henry, when he was sort of 11, 12 in age, and a new family come in and start living upstairs, hence the name of the book, The Family Upstairs. And as you read on, you are just finding out a little bit more about these people, a bit at a time, and it becomes a very strange situation. So I really liked the fact that, so every 3 chapters you're getting another chapter from that alternative perspective, and when I say the chapters were delicious in length, I mean that it just gave you the perfect little tidbit more. And I love it when a book goes from chapter to chapter from those different perspectives if it's written well, and this one absolutely was, because what it makes you do is it makes you go, okay, I've just found this out in this perspective, I'm going to need to read another 3 chapters to find out a little bit more about what's going on here. And I just followed that cycle. I sit down to read and read over 100 pages in one go, because I just needed to find out more. And that's exactly what I want from a book, particularly a psychological thriller. I should just be wanting and wanting and wanting to find out more without knowing too much. It was just that perfect Lisa Jewell has that way. I have read a couple of her books before of just dripping in that information just to keep you guessing, keep you on your toes, something to throw you off your stride a little bit every now and then. It was just great. The characters were well developed. You had a great amount of empathy for each of them, which proves that they are well developed and well written characters. The book gets increasingly more unsettling as you go as well, which is just what you want from a psychological thriller. And having read the epilogue, I was so excited to find out that there is a sequel. I went to download it straight away because I wanted to read it, but it's not coming out until July this year, so I'm very much looking forward to that. That will be a very anticipated book on my to be read list later on this year. But yeah, the epilogue was just really nicely tied up. You thought the book was tied up, and then you just had this little note of what's going to happen there, and that's obviously the stance that the new sequel is going to take. So hopefully that will be equally as entertaining as the first, and I am very much anticipating its release. So yeah, absolutely would recommend. 5 out of 5. Lisa Jewell is a great author, and I haven't read many of her books, and I know there are lots of them, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading a few more of those in the coming months. Okay, so the final book I'm going to talk to you about today, I actually only finished this morning, so it is fresh in my mind. This was another book that I took from one of Lucy Jane Wood's videos. It's not my normal style, but that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to branch out a little bit in the things I'm reading. So the book was Small Pleasures by Clare Chambers. It's got a gorgeous cover. So yeah, this isn't something that I would normally pick up. It is a historical fiction. It's set in the 1950s, and you have Jean, who is a journalist. She's the only female journalist in an office dominated by males, and she is intrigued by a story and a letter that arrives on her desk about a woman claiming to have had a virgin birth. And that idea already was just so intriguing. So it follows Jean as she investigates this story and gets sort of entwined with the family and builds relationships with all members of the family. I just really loved it. It's a slow burner, like there's not really many twists and turns along the way. It's just written beautifully. I just really enjoyed it. I felt like it was a wholesome book that I just really enjoyed. Like I said, I would never have picked it up had I not seen a recommendation on it. It just probably wouldn't have drawn me in, if I'm honest. But it just proved to me that I should branch out of my comfort zone a little bit more and read some different style books, because I just really enjoyed it. So I gave this book 4 stars. I reserve my 5 stars for ones that really blow me away. However, like I said, I finished this book this morning and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I went for a walk along the seafront with my mum this morning, and I said to her, "Mum, I finished this book this morning. I just can't stop thinking about it. Like, I'm emotionally drained from it." And without giving too much away, the ending of this book literally made me out loud this morning go, "No!" And not even the ending, it was the afterword. The afterword is incredibly short, but just is like a dagger to the heart. Like, it was gut-wrenching. And it made me sort of have to go back a bit through the book to completely put it all together. Yeah, so without giving too much away, it's really difficult to tell you just how a little bit emotionally scarred I am from it. But is that not what you want from a book? If I don't end a book with a gut-wrenching feeling, has that book done anything for me? So yeah, just a really interesting read. Like I said, the premise of the virgin birth is just intriguing as it is. And it's written really well, and it's sort of an investigation into the setting around that and how it happened, and you've got the whole, do you believe her or do you not? Do the scientists believe her? Do the doctors believe her? All of these different sort of things that make up, you've sort of left to make your mind up whether you believe her or not. And yeah, it was just a really interesting read, an emotional read, and just lovely. It was really lovely. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking into reading a few more different books like that to see if I like them as much as I liked this one. So yeah, 4 stars. Would recommend if you're looking for something a little bit different to read. So obviously, having finished a book this morning, I have the part I love and hate the most, picking a new book. I've got so many on my to be read list, and I keep watching book recommendation videos, and I've just recently joined TikTok and started scrolling through all the book talk things on there. So yeah, I've got a few different ones on my list. I think I'm going to go for a sort of rom-com-y vibe for my next one. I haven't read a book like that yet this year, so I just thought I'd talk you through a couple that are on my sort of list to be read. A couple of ones in that sort of rom-com-y vibe. The Spanish Love Deception, I've seen a lot about that on TikTok, and The Love Hypothesis, which I've seen a lot about on TikTok as well. They look like quite what I would call a light fluffy read, so I might give one of those a go. Beth O'Leary's The Road Trip, I absolutely love the book The Flat Share, so that was definitely up there on my list of ones to read. You and Me on Vacation, I've heard lots about that as well. And then I've got a couple of other ones on my list that I would like to give a try to as well, that again are a little bit different and I think I should try. So one was Madame Barova by Ruth Hogan, so that looks interesting. It's sort of about I think it's set in like the 80s, the 70s or 80s, about a sort of a tarot card reader, so that sounds quite fun as well. Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I've never read a Sally Rooney and I feel like I need to. Colin Hoover's It Ends With Us, I've seen so much about that book as well. And Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely loved Daisy Jones and the Six when I read it last year. And Malibu Rising is one of her latest ones, I think. Again, Daisy Jones and the Six is the only one I've read by Taylor Jenkins Reid, but I am keen to read the rest. So yeah, Malibu Rising might be one that I try soon as well. I am terrible though with my Kindle, because years ago, before I had a Kindle, I would not balk at paying $18.99 for the latest Sophie Kinsella, which was my go-to author in those days. I would not even balk at paying $18.99 for her new hardback book. And these days, if a book's more than $2.99 on Kindle, I'm like, oh no, I'm not paying that. So I really need to get out of that mindset that books shouldn't be 99p. That's not the price of books. So yeah, I think I might go for, I've had a couple on my to be read list for ages because they never go below $7.99, but I would have gladly paid $7.99 for a paperback book before Kindles existed. So I do need to get myself out of that little mindset. So yeah, I absolutely love talking about books and what I've read. If you have any book recommendations for me, any books that you've read this year and really enjoyed them, please pop them in the comments below, and I will check them out. And please like this video if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. I will keep you updated with what I am reading and what I've been enjoying as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!